Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Clubhouse Talks. Today I brought in somebody with a wealth of knowledge who has been building their basketball program over the past 17 years. Coach Phil LaScala is the head basketball coach at Lake Forest High School, and I dive into lessons he's learned along the way that he wants to share with other coaches about establishing his brand of basketball when taking over the program, his thoughts on establishing culture and the buzzword that goes with it, and his approach to dealing with difficult situations like losing seasons, parent feedback, and getting program buy-in. This interview is great, of course, for coaches looking to build their program, but also anybody who has a leadership position in their organization as we dive into Phil's philosophy in building with the staff and the people around you. Hope you enjoy this video with Coach Phil LaScala. All right, everyone, welcome back to some more Clubhouse Talks where we're catching up with people we're working with and our clients who are leaders, entrepreneurs, coaches in the sports industry. And today we have Coach Phil LaScala, the business education teacher and varsity basketball coach at Lake Forest High School. Phil, great to have you on. We were talking a little bit before this about how we've crossed paths a lot of ways, but you and I haven't really directly. I have a big family of brothers that you've coached and taught, but I'm excited we can catch up one-on-one here today.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure, Adam. You got a great family and looking forward to it, and obviously excited about your business as well.
Appreciate it. Well, you do a quick intro on yourself about, introduce your role, but your role at Lake Forest High School, how long you've been there, just give them an idea of who you are.
Sounds good. Again, I'm Phil LaScala. I coach at Lake Forest High School. I teach business education classes as well. I've been there for 19. This is my 19th year this year. Before that, I was at Mount Carmel High School in Chicago, and I was a basketball coach and business ed teacher and assistant dean there for about 8 years. And I also coached at the Division III level at Benedictine University for 3 years. I got to coach with 2 years with my father back when I was a young kid in my early 20s as his graduate assistant at Benedictine University. And then 1 year later on with Keith Bunkenberg, who was there for a long time and just retired a couple of years ago.
Awesome. We'll jump in a
much
little bit.
like-
I'll say we're jumping a little bit of like the career path too. I was going to have it at the end, but you mentioned your dad, and then Max was mentioning your brother's a coach at Lyle, right? And so I probably
Correct.
a lot of coaching family history, which I think is a trend amongst coaches. Like it's definitely like a family business that people are influenced by.
Yeah, it was something that, to be honest with you, when I first graduated college, I graduated with a business degree in marketing, and I didn't really think anything much of it. To be honest with you, I was a little removed from it. I wanted to get into the business world and be successful in that regard. And I worked for 3 years in the business world, and my dad offered me an opportunity to get my MBA. For free and be his graduate assistant. He always knew I wanted to get my master's in business, and it was an opportunity for me to do that. And then what I did is I worked part-time for a mortgage company as well, while I was being able to go back to school, be a graduate assistant, grinding it out, being there till about 10 o'clock every night doing stuff, and then helping coach as well. And he gave me the opportunity to be at every practice and help coach his team as well.
Awesome. And now you mentioned you've been at Lake Forest High School for a while now. Max and I were joking, like I think when we did our first order with you, you had just become Mr. 300 with 300 wins in February, I think it was. So we're trying to get some Mr. 300 shirts going for you. But so you have a lot of experience, and I feel like the past few people I've been talking to are all kind of like early on in their career, and it's like
interesting to kind of get this perspective of somebody like almost starting a new business when they're taking over a program. And I think it's gonna be great kind of getting your experience having kind of done that and been through a lot of it. And I'm sure it's changing every day almost um, with you. So we can get kind of your perspective entering into the profession, even entering in after graduating college into the business world, and kind of how you ended up as a coach now at Lake Forest High School. So I wanted to set the stage
Yeah,
of more. So go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's definitely like running a business. It definitely is. I mean, you're like a little mini CEO. You're in charge of 55, 60 families, that are in your program, and obviously it's not only those kids in your program, but it's the whole family aspect of it too, and there's decisions that you have to make that are uh, very important to those families. So it's definitely like a business.
Yeah. In many ways, on the people side, probably more complicated because, like you said, you're managing the players and young players, people that are not like fully developed adults. So you're managing young players, you're managing families, parents, and then you're also kind of always thinking about, which is kind of funny to me because I'm not in the world, but like you're also thinking about like the fifth graders, the sixth grade, who's coming up and like who's going to be in your program. Um, because how quickly the program turns over to new faces, and a lot of times it's the same families too. So I can imagine how complicated just the people side of the quote unquote business of high school basketball could be.
Yeah, and our Lake Forest is a little unique in that when I received the job and was offered the job 18 years ago or 19 years ago now, um, they also told me that I was in charge of the feeder program. Okay, that was going to be under my umbrella as well. And when I first started, we had four teams, one on each level, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. We've expanded that to having two teams on each level since probably started that about 10 years ago. We just wanted to keep the funnel a little bigger. And that is still under our umbrella at the high school. And like you said, that's then that develops into a lot more families um, and just a lot more development of kids, which is why I got into the business.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely dive into I think all those topics now in this program development part. So entering into, I know you had like a couple of different careers before like Forest High School in terms of where you've worked and the industries you've been in, but specifically entering into Lake Forest High School, what was the landscape of Lake Forest High School as a basketball program, of you as a coach? Was this like your first program really taking over? Give me the kind of set the stage of where you were entering to that first role at Lake Forest.
Yeah. Um, when I first received the job, Josh Grant was the head coach before I got there. Josh was an ex NBA player, played at Utah for Rick Majerus, one of the most legendary college coaches of all time. And obviously did some research and in regard to Josh, and he was going a different direction, and so I got the opportunity before Josh was there. Bill Donlin was there. Bill is a legendary coach. Is coached in the college level. He coached at Providence. He coached at Northwestern, and Bill was an excellent coach there at Lake Forest High School for 10 years, 8 or 10 years there before as well. And so they had a great, they just had an unbelievable foundation to basketball. I mean, like in the community. When I first received the job, I was just amazed at how many kids were coming to camp the first year. Were already signed up for camp, whether it was fifth graders or whether it was high school kids. So you knew right away that basketball was important to the community at Lake Forest. And one of the things I'll never forget, is when I first got the job. Tim Burkhalter was the AD, and he was brand new AD at the time, but he'd been in the basketball program for a while. And one of the first things he said to me is, "You got some work to do." And I was like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Well, we were really good the last couple of years, but we're going to be down a little bit in talent the next couple of years." And that didn't phase me at all. Like when I first, like, I didn't get where I was like negative at all. Like, really, like, well, there's no talent in the building, or my mindset was, we're going to establish this the way I want to do this with my staff. Okay. And I'm going to meet with my staff, and we're going to figure out what has worked and what is going on, what has worked in the past, and what we can do in the future to make this program the best it can be, and have the kids have the greatest opportunity to learn, and not only about basketball, but about life. And that was the biggest thing that we tried to do. And as a staff, is sit down and say, how are we going to build this thing? What's the vision of this program going to be? What's going to be our identity of Lake Forest basketball? What are people going to say about us when they play us? What are other coaches going to say? And that was the biggest thing we wanted to do, is establish that development. And that was right away. Obviously I've had some unbelievable assistants under me. You probably remember Coach Fodge. Chris Fodge played at McNeese State, and then he played for the Spurs for a little bit. Was one of my first assistants. Coach Billy Douglas played at University of Wisconsin. I had Coach Harmson. Joe Harmson played at Northwestern University. He was like the first guy I brought to Lake Forest with me at the same time. We were friends before that. And my early career mindset was like, surround myself with the best people possible. And luckily there was a lot of people in place already. Coach Barnt was there already. Darren Barnt had already been a head coach as well. And then a new guy, Steve Johnson. We hired Steve Johnson as a coach the same year I was there, and he was before that, he was at Lake Zurich High School. So we had guys with a lot of experience. And then we had one brand new guy that was right out of college, Kyle Wilhelm, who ended up becoming our girls coach for a long time, and had a very successful career coaching our girls basketball team as well. So developing that from stage one and getting the people surrounding us and surrounding the families with good people was really important. And I knew I had that like after the first summer. I was very, very fortunate to have most people, when they walk into a new job, they're scrapping for people. And they had a lot of guys in place. But not only did we have a guy in place, we had guys that were like probably smarter than me basketball wise. They were unbelievable. And you know what? And they were on board for the right reasons. They weren't on board. There was not one of them that was an I guy. They were all we guys, and right away you could tell that, like, just by how they were. We did a lot that summer together, where we went to Cubs games together as a staff. We had a barbecue, just as a staff to get each other on the same page. And also pick each other's brains. What are we going to do with this program? And Coach Burkle, was right. We had a lot of work to do. There was a very talented freshman and sophomore class, incoming freshman and sophomore class coming our way. Okay, but the juniors and seniors weren't as like. They had some talent, but they weren't as like our league was unbelievable at that time. And that was another thing I didn't really have. I was coming from the Chicago Catholic League up to the North Shore, and I didn't know much about our league. I knew there was, I knew Warren was good every year. I knew Stevenson was good every year, but our league was unbelievable for the first 10 years. Zion Benton, they were ranked in the top 10. They went second in state like my third year there. So every conference game was a grind. And the North Suburban Conference is one of the best conferences in the state. It's one of the most underrated conferences in the state. I know, like a few years before COVID, we were ranked as like the second best conference in the state. And it's when Brunson was playing, and Evan Boudreau, and we had some unbelievable players. But
those were some fun games.
Developing your programs, developing your program starts right away. You got to figure out what you want to do, and you got to make sure you listen to not only you got to listen to everybody. You got to listen to be honest with you. You even have to listen to parents. As much as people don't think parents should be part of it, you got to listen to it just to make sure that they're on board with what you're doing. I remember after my first year, I had an unbelievable talk with one of the parents, and he really helped me establish what we wanted to do. And he said, "Yeah, you did this thing, but the kids sort of didn't take it serious." And I was like, "You know what? You're right," because I wasn't as firm about it as I should be. And then, same with like the academics, like how important the academics are to this school. And that's a really important thing, and that should come first. And we set that stage right from the beginning. Okay. And listening to people and learning from people, you don't always have to take what they say, but you got to listen to them. And that's a huge part of starting your program and setting that stage, and say, all right, how are we going to do this? Right before I got the job, right after I got the job, I talked to a legendary coach, Pat Richardson, who was at Brother Rice at the time. Pat had been really, really successful in the Chicago Catholic League, and he was somebody that I really admired when we played them, how successful they were in regard to discipline. They were just unbelievable, sound man-to-man, running their offense, and they just every year were successful and out executing teams, even with better talent than them. And so that was one of the first things I did when I got the job. I sat down with him for 2 days, and said, "Hey, how did you start? Why did you decide to do the program that you did?" And we went through everything, not only offense and defense, but like program expectations of kids. What should we do community service wise with kids? What did you do academically with them? We went through everything. And obviously, a private school is a little different than a public school. You can do some different things, but it really started me on the right track, meeting with different people. And I did that throughout my career. Every year I'd meet with different people. Even before I got the first job, with another person I met with was, I thought, very influential in what we did, was a college coach. His name is Bob Byer. He was assistant to Bobby Knight at the time at Texas Tech. And I sat with Bob for a long time. I remember, I'll never forget, we sat for probably like 4 hours, and he showed me like how simple Bobby Knight's stuff was. Okay. And don't make it confusing. Keep it simple. How simple practice plans were. Don't try to put too much stuff on them. And then he showed me all of Bobby Knight's practice plans from the last 3 years. I mean, what a great way to learn, from one of the all-time best coaches there is. Obviously, there's some with some scrutiny about him, but as far as a tactician in coaching, he was really good. So to learn from those people was really important to me. And that's one of the things I always thought was and still to this day is so important, is to listen and learn. I don't want to have guys on my staff that are yes guys, that just want to believe and do what I want to do. And I want guys on my staff that challenge me, challenge the kids, and, don't always, say, hey, I'm going to do, we want to put in this out of bounds play. And they're like, yeah, that's good. No, we already have one like that. I'd rather have them say, I'd rather have them be honest with me than go along with it. And that's something
Yep.
that was we set the stage for early on, that I told those guys that. And we've been really fortunate to have a lot of continuity on our staff over the years. And even the guys that have left stay in touch and, come to our games a lot. Like Coach Douglas comes to our games a lot still. Coach Fodge watches our game film all the time and sends me updates on it and stuff like that, like what we should do and what we need work on. And so the loyalty has been tremendous that guys have surrounding me with. And if we didn't have that, I don't I would be here for this many years.
One of the two big things I'm hearing you talk about coming in is, on the business side of me, is calling it like brand, like who we are, what are people going to say about us, like who is Lake Forest basketball, and then the other side is people, which both those things in the business are super important. Who's going to be working and running the business, and not only the people on the staff, but also people that are on the business side, customers from the school side, parents and players and things like that. So I want to dive into a little bit of both of those. So on the brand side of who you are, entering into the program, you've had experience coaching at other places, and it sounds like you went out and networked and talked and got advice from other mentors and other coaches. Did you know what the brand of Lake Forest basketball you wanted to be? Did you take it on from what it was before? Walking in, what was your vision for that?
Well, yeah, I one of the biggest things that we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to execute and really teach them, to be really smart. One of the things I always thought was really important is they need to, you need to play hard, play smart, and play together. Okay, and I really took that into to intuition. I mean, every single thing we did, we wanted to make sure that our kids understood. Having an intelligent team on the basketball court is so vital. Okay, and out executing people, and then obviously the kids were going to play hard. We were going to develop that they set a standard. And we were really fortunate. We had kids, in your brother Matt's class that worked their tail off, and that was our second year there. Britt Myers and Matt Cassandra, your brother's really good friends. Those guys, Adam McConey, who's now coaching with us, and Robbie Durrett, and Brian Short, all those guys set a standard right from the beginning of how to work hard. Okay. And they just triggered it down to the lower levels. And they weren't the most talented group in the world. They got us back on the winning track after our first year. Our first year we struggled. We were 5-20. And we really struggled. We lost one of our best scorers early on in the year. We couldn't put the ball in the hole. We played hard. Everybody would come up to us and say how hard we played. We just couldn't make baskets when it counted. And that, obviously if you can't do that, and
was that a shot
second
to
year, the kids really.
Was that a shot to confidence heading your first? I mean, obviously you knew you were going to have a little bit of work, like you said, but I would imagine going into a new job,
for sure,
anything, and seeing that struggle, I'd be like,
it was a lot of.
Is this it? Yeah,
a lot of sleepless nights. Definitely. I mean, I came into a brand new situation, and I knew we weren't going to be great. According to what the coaches were telling me, that were there before, but I didn't expect that. Even after the first Thanksgiving tournament, we went to 2-2 at Thanksgiving. I expected we competed pretty much every game at Thanksgiving. So I thought hey, we're gonna we'll be all right, and I was starting to go scout our opponents at that time. And I'm like, I believe we can compete with everybody, and as a coach, like that's got to be your mind frame. You have to believe there's a way you can compete with them. And then just, piling up those losses after loss and being like, it was really frustrating. And it was frustrating for the kids, and to try to get them to understand that this is what we're, hey, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a process, and the seniors understood, and those guys to this day, I still talk to those seniors all the time. And they come back for different things. A couple of them have coached our feeder team. So it was like, it was about building relationships at that point, to be honest with you. And it wasn't easy because we had a lot of kids on that team that our first year, and a lot of juniors that didn't come back their senior year for their reason, not because I cut them, but because they just decided, what, I don't want to go 5-20 again, and we didn't. We went over 500 that year, the second year. And, we played, Matt Cassanda and Britt Myers were football guys, like Britt was a stud football, baseball, 3-sport athlete. Matt was a 3-sport athlete. And we had our struggles, but we had some guys in the pipeline that really were starting to build, some with continuity with, and those guys were unbelievable leaders to them. Okay. And they really set the stage. I think we had 3 captains that year. It was Britt Myers, Matt Cassanda, and Brian Short, and all 3 of them were on the same page as far as what we were trying to do as a program. And that was important for us at that stage, because we were like, we can't lose these guys, after going 5-20. That was a really tough thing. And, we went to a lot of people and researched a lot of things about what we were doing offensively and defensively. And I'll never forget our second year. We lost to Mundelein 81-51 in like right after Thanksgiving. And I was like, we sat down in the coach's office and we said, all right, no, we were like, what is our identity? We said it's going to be defense. If defense is our identity, how can we let up 81 points? Okay. And they were a very talented team at that time. They had a couple D1 kids. But 81 points is a lot of points to let up in a high school game. So we refocused ourselves that year, and we just said, hey, if we're gonna compete, all right, and we're gonna say who we are, we got to make it a commitment to defense, and we got to make sure they understand exactly what we are trying to teach them. And from that day forward, I'll never forget, the next day we had JV game, and we had practice before the JV game, and everybody practiced, even the JV players that were playing in the game practiced. And those guys still remember it to this day, because Britt was talking about it before this summer. That day, all we did, we didn't have any basketballs out. All we did was basic defensive fundamentals the whole day. And that's what we built our whole program around at that time, is, hey, we got to learn how to guard in this league. If we don't learn how to guard in this league, we're going to get torn apart. So we just broke it down for them every single day, from 1-on-1 to 2-on-2 to 3-on-3 to live, every single day, and just drilled into them some different concepts. And that was the biggest thing. I think that was the difference from our first year and then years going forward.
So I'm going to go a couple different ways now from that. One part is I want to keep on taking out some like really specific actionable advice for a young coach. I mean, talking about that 5-20 season, and in many ways you're saying, lucky you had like guys that were working hard, a good group of guys to be able to take a hit of a 5-20 season. But a lot of it too is, like you said, building relationships. Like if you have anything after a 5-20 season, is you still have those players. So what what was your approach and what was your advice to somebody who walks into their first season 5-20? It sounds like I'm going to take these guys. I want to make sure I care about them, and I'm going to instill like confidence, but also like work ethic. Like that seems like that was the one thing was like these guys aren't maybe the most talented, but I want to make sure that they carry the torch to make sure that the next group of guys can continue to grow the program. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. The relationship is the most important thing, and like understanding, did they have an enjoyable time with your program, when they go through the door, out the door when they graduate? Did they develop strong friendships with each other? Are they good kids? Are they going to have those friendships where they trust each other through life? Okay. Those are the like important things, obviously. I mean, to make sure that happens, even when cursing at them or, yelling every day and telling them they stink or stuff like that, that ain't going to work. That is not going to work. I'll tell you that right now. And, I was very patient to try to figure out what we had, in regard to like what we're gonna build on in the future without ruining those seniors senior year that year as well, and try to develop the younger kids as well. We brought up a freshman late in the year, Matt Vogridge, who ended up playing at the University of Michigan towards the end of the year. We had a sophomore up at the time, Andy Timpson, who was developing into a good player as a guard. And, we had to build with those guys as well as with the younger guys, and still like have our eye on making sure we had good relationships with those older guys. Okay. Because if we had those older guys, bad mouthing our staff, and, I guarantee you there was some trust lost. I mean, when you go 5-20 and you're in your first year, they're probably like, who the heck is this guy, coming in telling us what to do? And that's not an easy thing. And you're going home every night thinking like, all right, how do I build their trust? How do I keep doing this? How do I make sure I'm developing the younger guys in the right way? Making sure, if we bring up too many younger guys, that because our sophomores had a pretty good year that year. If we bring up too many guys, how many, what are the older guys going to do? Are they just going to give up? And then you don't really have anything as far as practice is concerned. So my biggest advice would be just, like if you're struggling those first couple of years, build those relationships with the kids, in a lot of different ways. It's more than just basketball. Like, you got to learn a little bit about them. Not a little bit, but a lot about them. Have individual meetings with them. Okay. Don't just have one meeting with them all year. Talk to them, pull them aside after practice. How's it going? What do you think so far? Those things are really important. The more you communicate with your team, the more they're going to trust you.
And then last thing on the 5-20, I know you don't want to talk about the 5-20 season too much, but last thing on 5-20 is if first season, are you dealing with a lot of parent advice then? They're like, hey, you're inexperienced and you're going 5-20, you should be doing this, that, the other, playing this kid. Are you hearing that much in that first year?
No, you know what? We were really fortunate that we didn't have to deal with that very much. I did have some parents give me some advice on different things, which I took on, but nothing about X and O's, nothing about what we were doing on the court with them. So it was more program stuff, okay, and building the program, so which was awesome. We were very fortunate in regard to that. I'm sure there was some, parents that weren't as happy as far as how many minutes their kid were playing versus some other kids, but that they're never going to be happy. I always tell the parents at the beginning of the year, there might be two parents that like me at the end of the year, and that's maybe the best kid's parents and maybe the kid that overachieved, that got more minutes than they thought they were going to get. I said, everybody else, and even the best kid's parents might not like me because they might think he needs to get the ball more. Okay. Or I said something to him to challenge him that they didn't like. In as a coach, you can't worry about what parents don't like you. You have to do what you think is right in your heart, okay, for their kid, to develop your kid, and parents aren't gonna agree with every decision you make, and they're not gonna agree with a lot, some of the major ones, as far as playing time, or what you're running, or why isn't this kid getting the ball more, stuff like that. But that's stuff that, like, if you are really sound in what you guys do and what you want to do, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the big thing. Like, if you're secure in yourself and your vision for the program and confident, you can listen to parents and take the advice you feel like you need, and also not get too thrown off by parents speaking up about their kids' playing time or advice and things like that, which I could see, again, as a young coach, for some people, that security may not be there right away, of knowing when to listen to parents and when to be confident in your decisions.
Yeah, and you just have to tell the parents that you're gonna work you're gonna work as hard as you possibly can for your kid to be successful and for this team to be successful. Like that, hey, and you have to also admit to them that, hey, I am gonna make mistakes, but I'll tell you this: I am gonna work as hard as I possibly can to be successful and make sure our program is successful. All right. And if they know that you're putting that effort in, they're going to respect you. And that's a huge thing for young coaches. Put the time in, okay? Work hard, all right? And let them know that you're going to work hard, okay? And that their kid is going to come, their kids are going to come first. They're my family. Like, every team is my family. Those fifth graders are still my family, all the way down to there. And you got to make that approach every single day, that, like, hey, this is who you are. And I care about my family, and I care about your son. And if you do that, guess what? You're going to earn the respect of the parents.
Absolutely. For the last part, on the people part of program development, you were talking about the staff that was there when you came in, in those early years, which I could see being a great help, being surrounded by talented people. And I can also see, when you're coming in and you have a vision for something, you want it to be your way. And it seems like your approach to it was more so, you have your vision for a program, but also, these other people have a lot of knowledge. And so it was a lot of, like, almost crowdsourced, of like who we're going to be and talking through it. Which, if you're coming into a program like that, it sounds like you need to be open-minded and make sure everyone has their seat at the table.
Correct. Definitely. But, one of the first things, we had a meeting. I'll never forget my first meeting with our staff. Okay. And I handed out my program philosophy to them, what I thought. And I said, here's the deal. This is what I put together for what I thought as our program. And in the next 2 hours, we're going to go through this. And then, if you don't believe in anything that we're having in this, all right, you need to tell me. Okay. And just say, hey, share with me what you think differently maybe we should do. And it went from everything. It was, we were there for more than 2 hours. Okay. And we just wrote stuff up on the whiteboard. And at the time, I think it was actually a chalkboard back then. And we wrote ideas up and different things and to build them on. And I went back, and I remember I changed that book a little bit to some different ideas, and sent all the changes to them. And what did we talked about? And that was really important, to get their trust. Here's the thing, like, And when I was an assistant coach, it's the same thing. Like, you have your ideas you want to do with different things, and it's hard sometimes to get them through to that head coach. And my thing is to make sure that I listen to those ideas, because sometimes, maybe people didn't listen to yours. And just because they don't do what you ask them to do as an assistant doesn't mean they didn't listen. And that's important too, is to be able to explain to them, hey, you know what, I think that's a good idea. If Adam McConey gives me something to do, and how we should play this particular situation, and I say, yeah, let me think about that. And then I come back the next day and I'm like, Adam, I thought about this. This is why I don't think it's a good idea. Okay. Or this is why I think it's a good idea. But to explain that to them instead of being like, no, we're not going to do that. Okay. That ain't going to work. That's two different ways to do it. You got to process it. And that's the same in business, I think, as well. You can't just be shooting people's ideas down every single time. You got to process it. You got to make them like, and then you got to look into it and say, hey, you know what? Tell them you looked into it. Yeah, you know what? I looked into this, but I think this could be a little bit better if we did it this way.
Right. And they may be disappointed, but at least they respect that you are open to it and looked into it and can know why, what the reasoning is, versus kind of being more a dictatorship of, this is my way or the highway, and you kind of get moving on. But it sounds like when you walked in, you had your vision. You're
Correct.
like, hey, this is what I believe in. I feel strong about this. But also, let's open up to conversation and let's pick this apart so we can all feel like that's one thing, is like, if people aren't bought in from the staff, then how I can't imagine how difficult it'd be to grow a program when everyone's kind of playing your game versus someone that's playing our games when they're all together in on.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that helped as well is, I don't think anybody expected me to have everything written out in a booklet put together for every one of them when I first stepped in the door. You know what I mean? I think they were just thought we were gonna walk into a meeting and be like, hey, my name's Phil LaScala, and I'm gonna be the head coach. This is what, you know what I mean? I didn't think they expected to be there for 3 hours going through basketball stuff and going through more importantly, program stuff. Okay. And a big part of it was, we were going to do the same thing on every level. We were going to run the same offense. We're going to try to have the same terminology. All right. And making sure the coaches understood what terminology we were going to use. So it made it easy for those kids. We were going to have the same defense, and not just like all of a sudden throw in some kind of 1-3-1 half court trap when we haven't even practiced it or something like that. You know what I mean? But what we were going to have a vision of what we wanted those younger kids to do, so they were ready for varsity basketball. And we've had unbelievable success getting our kids ready from the younger groups to where they came from to varsity basketball. And I'll give a lot of that credit to those coaches, obviously to the kids too, but those coaches have done a great job. Another big thing is,
go ahead.
Another big thing I would say to other coaches is get guys that you're going to trust. Okay. Get guys you're going to trust right away, that are going to not only believe in what you're doing, but get guys that they're going to trust, that are in for it for the right reasons. Okay. And that's to help kids, and they're going to disagree with some of your decisions. I mean, that's life, everybody, but some of my best friends at the school are all these guys that I coach with, and they're some of my best friends in life now.
how does that work on the staffing side for a high school, or is it like, you're able to work with, figure out who's in the teaching pool and then figure out who's interested in basketball and figure out works, or are you guys recruiting coaches and then finding teaching roles? Like, how does that work in terms of finding your guys that you can trust? How much control do you have as a basketball coach to who's available?
Yeah, that's not easy. You're right. In a public school, like in our school, we have we have a contract for our teachers, and one of the things that has in our contract is that all the teachers are first get first dibs on extracurricular coach activities. Okay, if they have the experience to be able to be in that position, okay, the teachers are good, which in a way is a great thing. You love having teachers in the building because they're there all day with the kids. It's really nice to have that, and to build that like continuity with them. But it's also like, okay, are they just doing it for the money? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had no one, I don't think, in my years here that has done it for the money, which is really an important thing. Okay, obviously making money is important, but they don't. I mean, like we don't make. I mean, I have 3 volunteer coaches on the varsity level that don't make 1 cent. They actually probably bring bagels and stuff like that for the kids and spend their money more.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know what I mean. So, but how it really works in a lot of public schools is that if you got hired, there's going to be certain coaches that are there. You can probably pick where you want to put them on your staff, like who should be an assistant to you. And I did that. I was able to pick, where each one was and what level they were going to coach, and the athletic director helped me in regard to talking to them as well beforehand to get an idea where they wanted to be. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it worked out pretty well. But we moved it around. We switched some guys around based on where we thought like their strengths were and what we needed to do. Like some years, like we knew we had to get our younger guys better, so I wanted to make sure there was a couple of younger or a couple of other coaches down there, to get them ready for varsity. So it's not an easy thing when you first walk into a building of getting staffing. I was able to bring one coach in, and to be honest, he was a volunteer his first year. He helped run our feeder program, so he got paid that way. But he was volunteer on our staff. That was Coach Harmson, and now he's been part of our program for as long as I've been here.
I feel like I could do a whole.
I don't know if that really answered you.
It did. It did. I don't. I feel like I could do a whole deep dive in like that first meeting you had to. I feel like that'd be super helpful. I don't have much time, but the idea of like coming in with the hard copies, paper of here's my vision, here's what I believe in, the terminology, um, is that's like an easy takeaway for a new coach to be like, hey, put it on paper and put it on something that people can write up on and put notes in and put it on a chalkboard. And like I was going to say earlier, I'm very visual, so if I walked into a meeting and was able to kind of be touch and feel and talk with the new leader of organization and edit and come together and have this new like almost manifesto of here's the program. I can't imagine how much better the buy-in is there versus, like you said, walking in and saying, "Hey, I'm the coach, and here's what I think," and it's all kind of in the air. It kind of, it's not quite on paper, and so I think that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, first impressions in life are huge. Okay, definitely. I mean, it's like it's the whole everything. Dress for success. What kind of shoes do you wear? How is that first 30 seconds of them seeing you? What are they going to think? Okay, and what is that first meeting going to be like? And what kind of leader do they want? You know what? And I happen to know that like there was a couple of guys that wanted that job. Okay, that I got that were going to be on my staff. So that's not an easy thing at all. Okay, that guys that thought they should have probably got that job if they were teaching in the building at the time. They probably would have. Okay, but they wanted to hire a teacher that was going to be they wanted to hire a coach that was going to be a teacher as well in the building, so they could have that relationships with the kids. But they accepted it unbelievably. I mean, and I learned a ton from them, and I knew I had to build their trust right away. Okay, and try to somehow show them what kind of leader I was going to be for this program. And like they said, those first impressions are huge. So coming in with being organized right from the start was going to be really important to me. Showing them samples of practice plans, showing them, I brought in a couple of those Bobby Knight practice plans and showed them like, hey, look how simple this is. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate high school basketball. Okay. We need to keep it simple for them. All right. And make sure we're doing the right things that are going to be successful for our program, and these are the things that I think would be very beneficial for us to do every single day. Okay. And obviously we'll have different drills for these, and that's where you guys come in. That's where you guys incorporate those drills. But we don't need to complicate this. Okay. They don't need to be thinking while they're playing. They need to react. Okay. And that's the biggest important thing.
I think about like the varying levels of
establishing that.
Go
ahead.
I was going to think about the varying levels of high school basketball across the country. You could have teams that are streamed on ESPN, and you have teams that are kind of barely putting together 5 players, 10 players for the program. So I can imagine someone entering into a program on less organized side would say, "Oh, you're doing too much, putting together the program and doing all these things." But that's kind of the excitement of walking into a new program, like a new business, and say, "Hey, this is mine now. This is like my responsibility, and I'm going to take pride in it and bring it to where I think it should be," versus walking into a situation and just assuming the program that it was. Not that Lake Forest was in a bad situation like that, but in terms of someone walking into a smaller high school or a smaller program, taking that advice of taking pride in what you're walking into and responsibility, accountability, you're able to kind of seize that opportunity much like a business and say, this is where I'm going to take it versus this is where it is right
now. Yeah, definitely. You hit that right on the nose. I mean, it's like, I think that it's really important to, you gotta set, like you said, I mean, you have to set the stage. You have to figure out how you're gonna build it. All right. How you're going to keep it that way. It's like that, old thing in business, like, all right, how are you going to get customers? How are you going to keep them? How are you going to grow them? Okay. And that's the same thing. It's like, okay, how are we going to get these guys to believe, okay, in what we're doing? All right. And then how we're going to keep them to keep doing it, and then how are we going to grow them every single day to get them better? And that's the big thing about program development. And it's not only that with your players, with your coaches, same thing. Like, you want to keep growing them. You want them to go keep learning, watching film, give you new ideas. And, with what's out there today, like, there's not a shortage. I mean, you go on Twitter right now and you can get, 20 new ideas of what to do. Okay. But what fits you? What fits your situation? Okay. What fits your program? All right. You can run every great play that is out there on, that they show you on all these different social media platforms that are out there, but you got to figure out what fits you. what's your,
Hmm.
and it's just not going to all of a sudden work because uh, Kentucky can run it, or UCLA can run it. Why should you run it? Okay,
Hmm.
and that's a big thing. Why should you do this? All these coaches talk about culture. Okay, how important culture is. Okay, and it's that huge buzzword, right? All the time, you know. But what is culture to you? Like, what is culture to your kids? Okay, and I think that's a huge part of it. Like what do you, and I think the culture is more of like, what do you want them to have when they leave? Okay, what do you want them to remember when they leave? You know, the friendships, the things, the fun things you did as a program, the how they went to battle with each other, and those things are so important as far as culture. That's that's what it that's what culture is. I think people talk about, oh, we're going to do this and establish this culture. I think the culture is when they get out. Okay,
Hmm.
when they graduate. All right, what did they do? Okay, when you see guys come back for Thanksgiving to watch your games when they're home from college, or if they're coming back from their jobs or whatever it is, then you've established some culture. Okay, because they care about what you did for 4 years with them.
Hmm.
you know and that's a bit, I think, a huge thing as far as culture. Everybody says, oh yeah, we're going to establish this as part of our culture. Yeah, you know what, that's great, but like, your culture really should be, what are they doing afterwards? Okay, all
Hmm.
right, like, what are they talking about after? If there's, I remember, Porter Mosier from Oklahoma, that used to be at Loyola, is one of my really good friends from high school. I played high school basketball with. And he said, one of the things about his Final Four team, they were watching some games together in the tournament after their Final Four team was done. They were over at his house. They came over to his house to watch the games, and they were using the same terminology, watching a game that they used, 3 years ago when they made the Final Four run. Like, that's culture to me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, when they're coming back and they're still talking about, like, the things that we did that were successful back then. Okay, and the relationships or the funny things that happened in film back 4 years ago. You know what I mean? That
Hmm.
that to me is how you establish culture. Is that the kids believe in what you're doing?
It sounds funny saying established culture because culture, probably like it's like you're saying, the definition of it is more so like it's rooted in history. It's people coming back. It's like it's that versus like saying, hey, this is our culture right away. It's like you don't just have culture by saying you have it or by doing one or two things. That's in everything you do over time. That's what gets you to a culture, um, which why it's so important to kind of be day in day out consistent with what your vision is for the program. That's how you'll build culture over time. Where I've seen it from a high school program
And I
to
think
big companies.
I think yeah, and I think the biggest thing culture is relationships. It's relationships. It's relationships that your staff has with each other. It's relationships that your kids have with your staff, and it's relationships the kids have with each other. Okay, that is a huge part of it. How do you establish those relationships with those three groups of you know kids with the players, with each other? How do they do it? Kids with the coaches, and how do the coaches do it with each other? That's, to me, all right, is what it's all about, is developing those relationships in those three areas. And if you do that in a strong way, you're gonna have a successful outcome of what you want to do.